You're watching Fugitive Red Eye, and welcome to another video game review, and today we'll be reviewing Dragon Ball Z Kakarot. As you can probably imagine, this review is a long time coming, but I'm finally getting around to it. So, if you've been watching me for the last little bit here, you know that I bought Dragon Ball Z Kakarot used at GameStop, and the game was fucking filthy. But of course, we cleaned it, and it worked just fine. So then I started playing it. Beat through the main game, and then I purchased all of the DLC and played all that as well. So today we're going to be talking about it. I remember when Kakarot first came out, I heard it was an RPG, and I was super excited. Then I found out it was just another retelling of the Z story, and I was less excited. And then I just ignored it for a while. Until eventually I started getting on this Dragon Ball binge again and decided to actually play it. Boy, am I glad I did. So Kakarot is, in fact, the best retelling that any of the video games have ever done of the story of Dragon Ball Z. It captures all of the key moments, it has a lot of the emotional parts of it, and it captures it really well. It actually feels like you're just watching the show. There are a couple of little nitpicks I have, some that are kind of big, others not so much. For instance, some of the violence is toned down for the game, which isn't the biggest deal in the world, but it is still a little annoying. But also, when Vegeta kills Android 19, he doesn't rip his arms off, he just hits him with a Big Bang attack. 19 logically should have absorbed it. Also, 19 just kind of goes into his attack like he was trying to get hit. It's really fucking weird. But otherwise, some of the changes for cinematic effect are actually really cool. For instance, when you're fighting Kid Buu, while Goku's charging up the Spirit Bomb, it basically freezes time, and Goku starts fighting Buu, and you actually get to play again, because obviously there wouldn't be much gameplay in just holding the Spirit Bomb there. And while you're fighting him, it plays Head Chala. Like, it's got a very cool rendition of Head Chala, that actually hearing that during the final battle of the main game is really cool. The moment I realized that this game was going to be great is when I went to go to Master Roshi's house, and I realized you get to explore the Dragon Ball world. This game is pretty fucking open world for a Dragon Ball game. And all I've ever wanted is a game where I can explore the Dragon Ball world, so this was a huge plus. The game also has hover cars in it, as well as the Flying Nimbus. The hover cars also include a rendition of that filler episode where Piccolo and Goku go to get driver's licenses. It plays out a little bit differently, but it's still really fucking cool that it's in there. The base game covers all the main sagas of Dragon Ball Z. Unfortunately, it does not have the Otherworld Tournament saga. Which, you know, I would have liked to have seen. I would have liked to have seen some of the filler stuff, like Hell and Princess Snake. I liked that the driver's license one was there, but I was a little disappointed that none of the others were. But nevertheless, it has really cool renditions of all of the main sagas. Also, there are a ton of side quests in the game, some of which can be pretty simplistic and stupid. But overall, I enjoy them, and they flesh it out quite a bit. And some of them add to the lore, some of which in ways that I like, other ones which I don't like. For instance, it tries to say that a lot of the weird, furry people are people that were taking this fucking, hip drug that made them into beastmen. I think that's kind of lame. And then they got stuck that way because of defective product. I thought that was kind of stupid. It didn't really need explanation. These people have always been in Dragon Ball. Also, it explained that the reason that Saiyans don't grow tails anymore is because they've surpassed the need for it because they're more powerful than the Ozaru form, which I guess that's fine. Also, Toriyama made a new character named Banyu, who's a former member of the Ginyu Force and the only female member. She was fine, kind of anticlimactic. You only fight her 3 times in the training simulation, and that's it. This game is, in fact, an action RPG, as it's said to be. However, the RPG elements are toned down in comparison to some other games, for sure. They're much more fleshed out than Xenoverse and Xenoverse 2. There's much more, actual, skill trees and shit like that, but in all honesty, you could probably get away with ignoring a lot of the in-game functions, because I know I did for quite a while. I did utilize some of them to great effect at other times, but I will admit there's a lot of shit you can just ignore and still play through the game fairly easily. The game is relatively easy. It's actually really fucking easy for a lot of the game. There are random difficulty spikes where it can get pretty difficult, but those are pretty short-lived, especially if you have healing items. If you have a ton of healing items, basically nothing's gonna fuck you over. Gameplay-wise, as far as the fighting, it's very similar to Xenoverse and Xenoverse 2. It's a little bit more simplistic than that, but it's pretty similar. In between each major saga, there's an intermission, which is a lot more free play. You go around, there's some side quests in it. You can also gather the Dragon Balls and make wishes. A lot of these wishes will lead to additional side quests. such as reviving characters to fight them again and things like that. Things that would obviously be non-canon, but are still fun to pad out the game. Also, this game has a connection to Xenoverse, because Toa and Mira do make an appearance in it, and there's these things called villainous enemies that are placed in there as time breakers, similar to in Xenoverse when characters are put in time periods they weren't. And with these time breakers, like these villainous enemies, when you fight them, once you've defeated them all, you get to fight Mira, and it's pretty cool. The battle with Mira was really fun. A lot of these villainous enemies are really overleveled, so it's basically just better to come back later in the game when you're a much higher level and fight them. The game also introduces these things called memorial pieces, which have screenshots of original Dragon Ball and talk about memories from original Dragon Ball, which I think was a really nice touch for world building and stuff. I loved collecting those. A lot of the side quests also had callbacks to original Dragon Ball, with the Pilaf gang showing up and stuff like that. Also, the random encounters had the pirate robots, which Goku fights during the Red Ribbon Saga when they go in the treasure cave. Also, there's these bases you can destroy, one of which is Muscle Tower, the others of which are Frieza's spaceship, and that's pretty cool. I will say with some of the side quests and stuff, and even some of the main quests, it's pretty clear which characters don't have a fighting model in the game, because there are times when an enemy's like, oh, I'm gonna fight you, and they're like, actually, I'm gonna use these robots. Here, fight my robots. So they clearly didn't put in a model for that character as a fighter. For instance, King Cold, you just fight a bunch of his men instead of him. The game has a few different playable characters that are available at different parts in the story, as well as you can use a lot of them during intermission. Ones you can actually play as in the base game are Goku, Vegeta, Gohan, Piccolo, Future Trunks, Gotenks, Vegito, and you can play as Goten briefly for part of the story. Characters like Krillin, Tien, Chaozu, Android 18, Yamcha are all support characters that you can have in your party but can't play as. You can actually play as Tien briefly in one of the DLCs. We'll talk about the DLCs a little bit more in a minute. And the DLCs do add in more playable characters for those different DLCs, such as Future Gohan for the Trunks DLC, Bardock obviously for the Bardock DLC, as well as a young Vegeta in the Bardock DLC. There is also some mini-games in it, such as fishing. The fishing mini-game is used to gather fish, as you would imagine, which can be used as ingredients either as campfires where you just cook there, or you can take them back to Chi-Chi to cook a full-course meal. Overall, the base game was pretty great, which is why I ended up getting the DLC, even though, as you guys know, I typically don't support Funimation, but I was able to rationalize it away, in the fact that it's Bandai Namco and not Funimation that's the publisher, and the fact is, if they're getting any of my money, it's a drop in the bucket because I'm just buying these DLCs and that's it. Obviously, I still don't support Funimation, and I'll still buy any Dragon Ball products used or not at all to not give them any money, but I was able to rationalize buying this DLC because, it's fun DLC. With the DLC, there were a total of 6 of them thus far. There might be more in the future. The first DLC was a Battle of Gods DLC, which admittedly is really disappointing. It's basically glorified training where you train with Beerus and Whis, and you do the same training routine with Goku and then Vegeta, and then you fight Beerus with each of them. The dialogue is hardly different between the two, and it actually doesn't replicate the movie, like, at all. It's just training. It does also introduce these sacred waters, which effectively work like experience candy from the later Pokemon games, which, you know, are kind of like rare candy, but they just give you a set amount of experience instead of just leveling you up. So yeah, I was disappointed it didn't replicate Battle of Gods like at all, or even follow the plot at all. In fact, it was completely different. Like, events happen completely differently. You could hardly really call any of it events. It's just Beerus shows up and he's like, hey, I'm gonna train you two. Come with me. It was cool that with this DLC, you could take Super Saiyan God and all the additional levels you got into the game. Plus, it raised the base game's level cap from 200 to 250. I wish some of the other DLCs would have let you take stuff into the main game, but not all of them do. Only 2 of them do, in fact. The other being the Resurrection F DLC, which we'll talk about now. The Resurrection F DLC is better than the Battle of Gods DLC in that it actually follows the movie to somewhat more. It does start out with more training with Whis and Beerus, but it does still have Frieza show up and have some of the events play out. There's some differences. For instance, Kid Trunks is there, which he obviously wasn't in Resurrection F. Also, the Ginyu Force is there, and they weren't there in Resurrection F, at the very least not in the main one. I'm pretty sure that Jace, Birder, and Guldo, and Raccoon were not there in the anime version either. I think just Captain Ginyu was, so the fact that they had the whole Ginyu Force was a bit, crazy. This one also introduced raid battles, which would later be brought back in the Bardock DLC, as well as some others, so we'll talk about that more. But the Resurrection F1 is still pretty short as far as the story, and it does have more of the training stuff you do at the beginning. Luckily, that wasn't the whole thing, because I was worried it would just be the same thing, but with Super Saiyan God Super Saiyan, also known as Super Saiyan Blue. And as with the Battle of Gods one, the Resurrection F does let you take your transformations, experience, and items out of it into the main game, which is pretty cool. After the Resurrection F DLC, there was the Trunks DLC, which I think, speaking on an objective level, is probably the best DLC because it's quite a bit longer than any of the others. Like, it's got basically a whole other side campaign where you do the entire history of Trunks. Also, some side quests were added in that. And they added in a lot more moments between future Gohan and future Trunks. And they have it, you know, be a little bit longer. Not to mention the fact that it's not just history of Trunks, because it also has the flash forward. It shows Trunks get back. You fight the androids again in the future, like Trunks does when he returns. But then also it shows the Trunks timeline deal with the Buu saga. So that's pretty cool. There's the whole second part to the Trunks DLC where you play out the Buu saga in the Trunks timeline. It also adds in these patrol things where there's these drones that are around the city that alert the androids if you stay near them too long, which is pretty cool. Then following up from the Trunks DLC, there was the Bardock DLC, which, as you guys know, Bardock is my favorite character. Bardock, the father of Goku, is my favorite Dragon Ball movie. And this does a great adaptation of Bardock, the father of Goku, keeping Bardock just as ruthless and cruel as he was in the original special. Bardock in this is still Bardock. He's not the pussified Dragon Ball Minus version. He's still fucking Bardock. So that's really cool. They kept Bardock actually true to his character, where he's just a Saiyan warrior who later finds out he's going to be betrayed and goes and tries to stop it. Very cool. There's also side quests where you get a little bit more with Bardock's team. Raid battles come back in this, but as annihilation events. It's effectively the same thing. You're just wiping out entire populations. They also added in Z-Blasts to that, which function very similar to Z combos, which can be used in raid battles to take out a bunch of enemies where you and your teammates all attack at once. Z blasts allow you to do that, but on your own, which both of these things wipe out huge groups of enemies at a time, and you have to charge up a meter to make them work. Another really cool thing about this Bardock DLC is that it also adds on Prince Vegeta's story, where you get to play as young Vegeta. I think that's really cool. You actually get to play an additional part just to kind of see where Vegeta's off at and what he's doing during the events of Bardock, the father of Goku. And on top of that, it also has a rendition of Solid State Scouter that plays in it, which is really fucking cool. I love that song. Following up from the Bardock DLC, there was the Piccolo Jr. DLC, the 23rd World Tournament. Also really good. This introduces ground battles, because in the base game and the other DLCs prior to this, you could only battle in the air, you couldn't battle on the ground. But obviously, since flight wasn't really a big thing in original Dragon Ball, ground battles adds on an extra type of fight to that, which is really cool. It starts you out fighting Demon King Piccolo, and then has you training for the tournament, lets you go and play through Tien's training and fight Mercenary Tao. And then finally, it lets you fight Piccolo. There's also side quests and a few other things here. This one's also a really great DLC, and while you're fighting Piccolo Jr., it actually plays a remix of the original Dragon Ball theme song, which is also really cool. You also get some post-game side quests with this. You also have post-game side quests with the Trunks DLC as well that I neglected to mention. And with Resurrection F, there's some training stuff you can do with Frieza later. This DLC was great, because again, it let you revisit original Dragon Ball. Also, you can speed up with the Nimbus in this, which you can't do in the normal game, so that's cool that the Nimbus can go even faster in this version. Following up from that, we got the final DLC as of yet called Goku's Next Journey, which is an Oob DLC that leads up to you fighting with Oob. And then going to train him. It adds on a little bit to that. There's not a ton to it. It's a lot shorter than some of the other DLCs, but it is still fairly fun. And it does let you build on stuff. Unfortunately, with this one, I wish it would let you take your transformations and levels and shit from the main game into this one and vice versa. But for some reason, it doesn't do that with this one. It only does this with Resurrection F and Battle of Gods. So you can't actually use all the stuff from the base game or the other DLCs in this, which I wish you could, since this is chronologically the last one. I have actually not completed all of the post-game side quests to this one yet. This one does add on more memorial pieces, so I plan on doing that soon. But I still wanted to get this review out, and since I finished the main game of it, I figured I'd do the review. So yeah, that's talking about the DLCs, but overall, I would say this game is actually my current favorite Dragon Ball game. I like that you get to explore the world. I think it does a really good job at recreating the series. It feels like I'm watching the show when I play it. The inclusion of all the most important moments, as well as some of the actual original songs appearing from the original soundtrack. All the Japanese soundtrack, of course, but still, it's still nice. And hearing Head Chala, the original Dragon Ball theme, and Solid State Scouter were all very nice treats. The game also has a really cool intro of Head Chala at the beginning of it. But it's really cool to get to explore the world. That was really the main draw to me, is that I can explore the Dragon Ball world, and that there's side quests, and I can use a hover car, and I can use the Nimbus. If I'd have paid for it, I could also use the Tau Pillar, but obviously I didn't buy that because it was like $99 $99 for just that, and I'm like, fuck that. I should have come with my season passes, but whatever. Overall, on the gameplay front, it may not be the most advanced as far as a fighting game or even as an RPG, but as an actual Dragon Ball experience to explore the world, have fun, level up your characters, and have a decent fight, it is still fun. Like I said, it can be simple at times with the way it works, it can be really fucking easy, and then there can be random difficulty spikes, but overall this game is great, and as I said, I currently rank it as my favorite Dragon Ball game. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this review. This has been Fugitive Red Eye. Have a good one. Toodles.
You need to be stopped! What am I watching? I don't know, but I hate it.
Subscribe to Fugitive Red Eye.